Welcome, everyone, to our next episode of Coffee with Sales Engineers. I know it's a little bit late in the afternoon or late morning for both of us, so we're not drinking coffee. I just finished mine, but I don't know, Corey, if you're drinking coffee, but
I'm done, but I got
got
mine.
yours. All right, there you go. Wonderful. I'm very excited for this episode to reconnect with my old friend Corey, who has an amazing experience, very unique experience in sales engineering. And Corey, why don't you introduce yourself, and then we'll dive into our 4 or 5 casual questions to get some of this content out.
Sure, sounds good. Appreciate it. I'm Corey Bradford. Been in sales engineering and other customer-facing roles for the last 20 plus years. My background went to University of Texas. We got an electrical software engineering degree, really focused on there you go, hook 'em, focused on the software engineering, computer science background. But I did a lot of software engineering work during the course of college, a lot of internships and work during the year. But upon graduating, I actually joined Deloitte Consulting and started as one of the Big Four consultants analysts. It was a very customer-facing role, working on large projects, et cetera. And that's really where I began the customer-facing aspect. But a few years after that, actually, Sachin and I were working at Convio, a small startup that provided SaaS solutions for nonprofits. And both of us actually were doing the professional services consulting role and customer facing and helping out our customers to implement the solutions, et cetera. But both of us moved into a sales engineering role as that business took off, and the sales engine really started cranking up. We realized we needed technical folks to actually be the gap and the bridge between the sales efforts and what customers were needing and their technical and business challenges and objectives to the actual technical solution they need to be implemented with our products. So we both fell into that sales engineering role. And at some point later, I actually moved on to Google. I've been at Google for over 16 years now. And so when I started there, I was known as Google Enterprise. I was one of the first sort of sales engineers in Google Enterprise. In fact, it was a very smallish organization at that time within Google. And we watched that kind of grow and evolve into what's now Google Cloud. So I've had the opportunity to really continue to be a sales engineer, or as we now use the term customer engineer. It's transitioned. I kind of feel like that interchangeable in a lot of ways, really, if you see that term out there. But yeah, I've been able to move through lots of products as the technology landscape has evolved from we had a physical search appliance installed in data centers now all the way to AI solutions, right? So I've been able to pivot, learn new technologies, and keep things fresh as I've been a part of that organization that's evolved over time.
Such an amazing journey, and I can't wait to dive into all the different roles you've had at Google in your 16 years. But you mentioned, let's bring the audience back to, you said we both fell into this role. You didn't, when you were in high school, you weren't like, one day I'm going to be a sales engineer and be a sales engineer for 20 plus years, and neither was I. Do you remember what was that moment? What was the stars aligning that made you go into sales engineering? Like when you say we fell into it, as all SEs fall into this role, remind us, what were the circumstances?
Yeah, so it's a good question. And I think that for me, it really started with that foundational knowledge of I wanted to be working with customers, right? There was really that interest in being on the front lines, working with customers, seeing them actually apply the technology and use the solutions to achieve their objectives. And so certainly that is something that comes with the consulting role and the professional services realm. And I think there's other roles around customer success, et cetera, that are part of that. But I think that the reason I ended up in the role in part was as a small organization tend to wear a lot of hats, right? And I think this was very newly formed. It didn't really exist as a role for a startup at that time, and we saw the need. And I think part of it that when I really looked at the opportunity and was being asked to move into that role was in part because of the variety that you get to experience. I really, as a sales engineer, one of my favorite things is really being able to work with a good variety of customers from different sizes and customer segments to different industries and verticals, and really keeping it fresh and new and seeing all their different challenges. You really get a little bit more breadth, in my opinion, in the role. And so seeing the breadth of what, in our case, it can be a customer like an American Red Cross wanted to do versus like an Easter Seals versus American Diabetes versus smaller nonprofits. And they all have different unique challenges and objectives. And so really being able to experience that breadth of working with customers and formulate a solution too. When you think about customer facing roles, and I think about really the customer life cycle from the very initial marketing leads all the way down to implementation and customer success and how it fit in the middle, it's really an exciting opportunity to meet with the customer and hear their problem and challenges, and not, they don't understand maybe what a solution might look like, and you're able to really craft and engineer and build that solution that meets a specific need they have. And so to be at the initial stage of where they're trying to sort that out and figure it and be a key component of helping them to get there, and then seeing downstream in their customer journey the success of that as they do implement and see results from the solution that you helped craft with them is a very rewarding experience, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've never thought about the point in a customer journey that we all have the privilege and an opportunity to engage, right? The mindset that they're on, they are starting to dream something big, and we are the ones that are facilitating that dreams. Now, it's a slippery slope because you also have the power to make that dream unrealistic because they are in the dreamy phase, but it is our responsibility and accountability to make sure that those dreams are realistic. And as you said, the rewards come from being able to see those customers realize those dreams that we're together.
And I think helping them getting pointed in the right direction. Like I've done a lot of interviewing, hiring at Google. And one of the things I want to look for in a sales engineer is that they know to first and foremost really understand the customer's challenge and problem. And I give the silly home improvement analogy of you will meet with the customer and they say, I need a hammer, right? And you're like, oh, we got the best hammers and they're made of this material and they're the cheapest and the lightest and the strongest. And our hammers are amazing. Without ever stopping to say, what are you doing? I'm building a deck, right? We actually think a better approach for building a deck is to use decking screws, not nails necessarily, in which case you actually need a drill, right? And so back it up, they're like, okay, now I'm going to build a better deck. And it's a very simple, silly analogy, but it just back up, like customers will come to you with a solution. And so it's also helping to guide them to the appropriate solution that's going to get them the best results, because they may not know that at the onset of trying to address a particular challenge. Right?
Yep. I love that analogy. Thank you for sharing that. It resonates so well. One thing you mentioned about the variety of the role, and I think there are many roles where things can get mundane. I feel like sales engineering you're working with different reps. Every prospect brings different level of requirements, characters, personalities. Is that variety what's kept you in this role all these many years? One thing I see, sales engineers can very easily go into so many different fields, but what's kept you staying in this profession all these years?
Yeah, I do think that part of it is the evolution of technology. And so one of the pillars of being a successful sales engineer is the ability to learn pretty rapidly, frankly, in many environments. And I think we're given as sales engineers the not just opportunity to do so, it's a requirement of the job, right? And so by being able to have touch points with new and evolving technologies as everything has gone on, it's always something fresh and new. And frankly, while I've mentioned a lot of the customer facing aspects, which I think is a key, something that you need to be keenly interested in to be a successful sales engineer, you do also need to be a technologist at heart. That to me, you need to understand and have a certain passion for technology. And given that ability to be able to pivot into new technologies and learn new things, it always keeps it fresh. I do think there's another angle there to what you're saying. Although I've stayed in sales engineering, many colleagues that I have pivoted out to being product managers, being sales reps, being post-sales consultants, being customer success folks, whatever the opportunity may be. And then they've even moved back into sales engineering. So I think in that horizontal flexibility, it's really a great set of skills that you acquire as a sales engineer that do allow you to, so you don't ever need to feel like you're pigeonholed into this one particular career. And so knowing that, I have the flexibility to go do other things because of my experience as a sales engineer is also a very secure feeling, and being able to do something different if I wanted to. And I've seen a lot of people do that. So I've never felt the need to necessarily stay in the role. Right?
Yeah, it does give you exposure to so many different functions, right? And with that exposure, knowing that you have the skill set, the foundational skill sets, you can very easily move into these roles, but many either pivot out, come back in. I personally did. I moved into channel sales and then came back into sales engineering, and many just continue to stay on, which makes sense. It's interesting. Earlier, we were talking about, which I hadn't thought about, the role of sales engineering at the early stage. Both when you and I were at Convio, we were established platform, we had a sales organization, but give us some insights into, if entrepreneurs are listening into this podcast or people that are starting to build out a business, what role in your experience, I know you've done a lot of advisory and working with early stage founders, what role does the basics of sales engineering plays when you're just starting a company?
Yeah, I think for founders and early stage startups, getting the timing right is important, and getting the hiring, the role profile, and the kind of the right level of seniority is important as well. I do think that in terms of where and when a sales engineer is going to get engaged, both on an opportunity, but also just starting within the organization, starting to build that actual practice within an organization. I do feel like there's a need for there to be a strong product market fit and some definitely initial go-to-market motions, right? Meaning that as an early stage company, you definitely need to have some customers and prospects and a decent sales engine, right, running, so that you have value proposition and the storyline coming in. I think when it does very much depend on the nature of your product as well, because I've worked with founders who have a very easy to implement, out of the box, not much customization kind of product, and there'd be a little less of a need for a sales engineer. But the more technical you start to shift to what the sales process and the buying process for your customers look like, the more you would tend to need that the sales engineer. And then I think this kind of gets back to our skill set conversation, because in early days for a startup or scale up, they may tend to use some of their engineering resources or tech support resources, and that's certainly an initial path. But as things get a little bit more complex and you really need to scale the organization out, you tend to need some folks with the skill sets that have the ability to truly understand the business objectives, the business side, the sales aspects of that sales cycle, along with the technical pieces. And that's where hiring somebody with a sales engineering background is going to benefit the organization, so they can build the foundation. I think that is key, is as much as possible, is to build best practices and a good foundation for both sales, but sales engineering specifically. As your organization grows, it kind of avoids having to incur any technical debt or process debt, right? Where you may have to go back and reconfigure, re-engineer things. And I think it actually sets you up for success in terms of your sales wins as well. I do see sales engineers, I think that's one critical message, is that sales engineers are a very critical part of the overall customer journey and the sales process. You have your account execs and your sales reps, and you have your sales engineers. They're not merely like a tool from the toolbox that you pick up and then put down when you're done, and they just contribute one little part. They are an integral part from a certain stage in that opportunity all the way to closing a deal, if you will. But even for us in a monthly recurring revenue model, actually an ongoing product adoption, et cetera, part of that customer success journey. So I would encourage everybody to really see sales, and at a certain level of maturity, see sales engineering as an integral part of your sales cycle, and a team member that's equally valuable to your sales reps to really be successful with your customers and meeting your sales goals.
Yeah, I would even say, bringing back your Home Depot analogy, right? It's even at the early stage where you don't have funds to hire a sales engineer just yet, right? There's probably an element of those founders spending time with sales engineers, and almost in a way, like, what would a sales engineer do in this situation? So your Home Depot analogy, you're talking to prospects, you don't have a product fully baked out yet, right? You've got a vision for what the product can do. If the prospects are asking about hammers, applying the same skill set that you just talked about that SEs are really good at, to say, why do you need the hammer? Let me not start diving into and showing you all the amazing hammers we have, but what are you trying to do? Like that type of skill sets, I think, foundational of sales engineering. If the early stage founders could maybe spend time with sales engineers to say, how would you approach these early level conversations, might be an insight. But you're right, because you can almost be too early in hiring your sales engineers, right, in that sales cycle. But that doesn't mean that you can't leverage the sales engineering in your journey?
Yeah, I think you can understand some best practices and some foundational areas of sales engineering. For example, what you're describing is one of the earlier stages of where sales engineering might get involved in the sales process, and that's discovery, right? Discovery may happen by the rep, technical discovery by the SE. And so understanding how that is a critical component to help lay out what your sales process looks like, they can really help founders, even if they may not have a full-time sales engineer on staff just yet,
Right.
understanding what they bring to the table, what they do, and incorporating that into their sales process could really be key. And then it helps a little bit of empathy there when they do go to hire sales engineers. They
Right.
have a little bit more knowledge about what that profile should look like and what kind of individual
Right.
they need to fill that role as they build their sales engineering team out.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty amazing, because a lot of people I talk to, they're like, we need a big sales team to start hiring sales engineers. And I think what you and I are both talking about is the value of the role actually starts pretty early on. Now, you've mentioned that in your journey, variety of the type of things you're doing has been really attractive. The fact that you're a technologist at heart, always learning, always evangelizing new technologies, is very attractive to you. If you have listeners on this podcast that are just learning about what the heck the sales engineering function is that people are talking about, and they're curious, maybe they're product managers, maybe they are implementation consultants, maybe they are software engineers, they're curious about, should I become a sales engineer? Should I consider it? You've hired a lot of people, you've worked with a lot of SEs, you've worked with a lot of SEs that have gone into different professions. What are some thoughts that you want to share with them that they should think about before entering this field, or think about what makes them a really good candidate for becoming a sales engineer? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I do think that first and foremost, you do have to have that interest in really customer empathy, right? It's maybe a
Yeah.
buzzword that's been never used, but it is true. You need to have that strong interest. Maybe passion is too strong a word, but you really want to meet with customers, understand what they're doing, what their objectives and challenges are. You really want to help them out and provide solutions, right? You're very solution oriented. You're not just technology oriented, but you are solution oriented. You see something that's going to solve a problem, that's going to fit a need, right? If that is appealing to you, then I think it is worth considering. And as I mentioned, there's multiple customer facing roles, and there's some overlap in both interest and skill set. So look at those roles as well, whether it's consulting or customer success, et cetera, and see what's the best fit for them. But I think that's the starting point, right? And then I think that the learning and growth mindset is important as well. Just that ability to say, I really want to. I'm hungry to learn new technologies, new solutions, see what's going on, see where the industry is headed, see how things are evolving, right? And I want to be kind of part of that. I hate things that are stale, right? I don't want to be sitting there and be stagnant in anything, right? If that's kind of, you get that itch and that mentality, I think that there's a strong possibility that it's a good fit for you as well. Those are some core pillars. And I think that the last part maybe is the glue that brings them together, right? Because there's roles that are customer facing. You can go be in sales, right? There's roles that are technology, and you could be technical support. You could be just a software engineer, right? That's strictly focused on technology. But I think it's the desire to bring those together and see the marriage, if you will, between the business needs and the technical solution, and being kind of part of the glue, I guess, that brings them together. And
Did you just say the marriage between sales and engineering?
yeah, exactly.
There you go.
It is,
That's why it's called sales engineering, folks. But no, great points on, yes, you could obviously, if you don't want to be customer facing, this isn't going to be the great role for you. That's the big aha. But if you are excited about solving problems, being in front of customers, but I love the glue part that you mentioned, because you're right, like people that may be excited about working with customers and customer facing, there are many choices, right? But then you take that subset of other people, those same people that don't just want to be customer facing, but they also want to be lifelong learners, have that growth mindset of technologist and bringing technology to solve problem. Now it's a smaller subset. And then aligning that, right, with passion for just bringing the right solutions and problem solving, right, to your audience really is the secret ingredient and recipe for a successful sales engineering career.
Yeah, and I would to differentiate a little bit between some of the other customer facing roles. One of the things that I would highlight to folks is that sales is in the title, right? And so, although I called out earlier that a lot of organizations are now using terms like customer engineer and field engineers and things like that, that's all well and good, and it does make sense. While you're not necessarily a salesperson per se, as your one and only, that's the role. They don't make no mistake that sales is part of the role, right? And so
You're selling.
you are
Yeah.
selling. You are objective, and you have internal goals set to achieve revenue for your organization. And when you're meeting with customers, I mean, you do have a goal of you want to get them the right solution, right? You want something that's going to work for them. You don't want to just sell them anything just to sell it to them. And that's potentially differentiation between sales engineers and sales. You want to make sure that something that it's going to work for them, right?
Right.
But you are working to convince them that the solution that your organization provides is the right one for them and it works. And there's a lot of competitive differentiation, right? And you have competitors in there and saying their solution is better and here's why. And you're that's the job, and you're working. I would just make people aware you're not strictly a technologist, you're not strictly customer facing. You're working to sell the product, right? You need to convince minds and hearts of the stakeholders, right? It is part of the gig, and you don't have to be overly salesy for that. Make no mistake, you don't have to.
And convince them with what's right for them, right? Because you could have sold them a really expensive hammer versus helping them understand that if they're building a deck, they really need a reasonable drill, right? So I think I love that analogy. Thank you, Corey. It was so great to see you, man, after such a long time. Love all the insights that you shared with your amazing, successful sales engineering career. I hope the audience finds this insightful, and let's grab coffee when you're back in Austin, my friend.
Sounds perfect.